Hello everybody, this is my round 3 CMP 1911. This is a rack grade. It is an Ithaca frame Remington Rand slide. What I'm going to do today is replace the recoil spring, firing pin spring, and mainspring, as there's no real way to tell when they were last replaced. One can assume it was when they were refurbished last. I think this one was refurbished in 1986 due to the date that's on the barrel, but if you saw the short that I created, those 3 springs are significantly shorter than the wolf springs that I'm going to be using today. So let's get started with disassembly. So we'll start by taking a look at the slide, the springs that are part of the slide. Now this spring was pretty short compared to the wolf spring. It's also a 16-pound spring. So you can see it's about an inch shorter. And let me take apart this firing pin stop so we can look at the firing pin. This is a pretty straightforward process. It's not complicated. You can do it with just a punch and a hammer. But take a look at these springs. The longer springs are the new springs. Obviously the short ones are the ones that came with the pistol. So let's switch them out and see what kind of improvement we get. Trying to keep this in frame. Hopefully it does. There we go. Make sure it's the right one. It's definitely the right one. Leave this here for now. Let's take apart the mainspring. So I found it's easier to take the mainspring housing off when when the hammer is down. So we'll lower that, put the punch in, and use the hammer. It's still a little tight. We got the mainspring housing off, and we're going to move on over to my vise. Now that we moved over to the vise area, I have the mainspring housing wrapped in some cleaning patches. I don't want to add any additional scratches. I understand this is a used gun, but don't want to damage anything any further. So we're going to push the pin out, which is located right there, while pressing the mainspring plunger down, so that way the mainspring plunger doesn't just go firing off. So let's do right here in the vise. Make sure it's in there pretty solid. You can hear it pop. Here's the pin, and the mainspring just slid out. So let's go back over to the bench. Back at the bench now, I'm going to show you what's inside the mainspring. We have a detent at the bottom, the mainspring itself, and the plunger assembly at the top. We have the pin and the mainspring housing. Had to take that off camera for just a moment just because it was being pretty stubborn, but here we've got it removed now. The plunger came off pretty easy last time. Just didn't lose that. But here's the original mainspring and here is the replacement. So you can see the replacement is just slightly longer. We're gonna put this back together now. go back over to the bench vise. Back over at the vise, might be a little bit hard to see, but the pin itself has a head, so it only goes in one direction. So you're going to want to start it from the rear. We have to push the mainspring down. So I have it again wrapped in some cleaning patches. I'm going to tighten it down, make sure it's good and solid. Press this down. And slide the pin in through the back, and it goes in most of the way. You can release it. I'm going to put it down on the bench so you can see it's slightly sticking out. Let's go ahead and pound it back in. So now it's flush. You can feel it. And back to the bench for reassembly. The easiest way I found to assemble this back together is to make sure the hammer is fully forward, that it's not cocked back a little bit. It's quite easy to have it get stuck in that position. So just want to make sure it's all the way forward. And you see this little nub that's hanging out right there, that's attached to the hammer. So you're going to slide this back in. There's 2 grooves in here, so that way it's easy to go back together. It's back in place. When you're putting the pin back in, make sure you use a punch, because it's very easy to miss with your hammer. And actually, you're going to hit the grips. Just like that, it's back in place. Let's give it a little tap just to make sure. Now on to reassembly. Slide I have partially assembled earlier, or already from the part replacement, the spring replacement we did earlier. I like to lock the hammer back at this point, and put the slide back on. I've seen people assemble these and disassemble them in different ways, but I found this way is the easiest for myself, just because we don't have to worry about fighting the recoil spring on disassembly, or when we're reassembling it. There was the old story of you needed 3 hands to put a 1911 back together. I found that's not the case if you put the pistol back together this way. Now this one already has the infamous idiot scratch. That wasn't done by myself. Sometime during its use as a military pistol, it was reassembled and scratched. Typically what I do is I start it here at the top, and I just press the detent in. It slides in without scratching the slide, or I'm sorry, scratching the frame. You're good to go. Push the slide forward. It's locked in place. Let's put this piece on first. It's much tighter than before. Okay. Let's do a functions check. Safety on, not firing. Fires, keep the trigger held down, cock it back. Hammer did not release. Release the trigger. Passes the function test. And that's how you replace the main spring, recoil spring, and firing pin spring. Thank you.